I would like to give a fair warning before this video starts. This video will be talking about a very disturbing group of crustaceans. These arthropods are of medical and veterinary significance, so if that sort of stuff bothers you, click away. If seeing dissected animals disturbs you, you probably shouldn't watch this. I've tried to avoid the most disturbing of the images, but I am still talking about vampiric parasites living in your organs. Do not consult the primary literature if you are squeamish. You will see pictures you can't unsee. Go watch something else. You've been warned. If you peel open the lungs of a snake, you might find something that looks like a worm inside. It would be pale, ribbed, an inch or two long, and clinging to the organ tissue with a set of hooks. You would be wrong to think it is related to other worms. It is a crustacean that gave up swimming in the sea hundreds of millions of years ago and crawled into the air passages of vertebrates. Its name is Pentastomida, or a tongue worm. Pentastomids are one of the great oddities among animals. There are hundreds of species, and they spend their adult lives inside the noses, throats, and lungs of vertebrates. The vast majority attack reptiles, especially snakes and crocodiles, but some infect birds and mammals, and a tiny handful attack people. The species Linguatula serrata is why they are called tongue worms. It lives in the nasal passages of dogs, and its flat body looks kinda like a tongue. Other species are much less recognizable. Adult pentastomids can be tiny, or up to 6 inches long, the largest of which live in African and Asian pythons. Pentastomids are extremely degenerate. They have no specialized respiratory organs, they have no real circulatory system, no real excretory system, and no obvious sensory organs beyond a few setae around the head. They are guts wrapped in muscle and chitin, and their reproductive organs take up the rest of their body. The name Pentastomida means 5 mouths. This is because of the 4 sets of hooks next to their central mouth, which kind of look like other mouths. These hooks are what tongue worms use to burrow into the organ tissue of its host to feed. These hooks are not flimsy. Because they are crustaceans, the body is reinforced with chitin, the same as a crab shell. By driving the hooks into the wall of the host's airway and locking them into place, the pentastomid anchors itself against the constant air movement and the host's attempts to cough or sneeze it loose. Once latched on, they use their central mouth to puncture blood vessels in the host's airway to feed. Heavy infections of these crustaceans can drain a large amount of the host's blood. Females are much larger than males, sometimes 10 to 20 times larger. Inside a mature female, the reproductive system can occupy nearly the entire body. Males are small, slender, and devoted almost entirely to producing sperm. Mating happens inside the host's airway. A single female can release millions of eggs, which are released in a steady stream into the host's air passages, where they are coughed up, swallowed, and carried into the world in either feces or coughed up mucus. The eggs need to wait for an intermediate host. Intermediate hosts are usually a small mammal, a frog, a fish, or another reptile, which swallows the eggs by drinking contaminated water or eating contaminated vegetation. Once inside the new animal's stomach, the tiny larva hatches and begins to drill its way through the wall of the stomach. It tunnels through the gut wall, enters the abdominal cavity, and migrates through the host's body, eventually settling in an organ to encysst and wait. The encysted larva waits in suspended animation for the new intermediate host to be killed and eaten by the right kind of predator, usually a snake. If the wrong predator host eats it, or no predator hosts come along at all, the parasite dies. The baby pentastomids are released by the digestion of the intermediate host's tissues. Then they find their way up through the predator's gut and esophagus and crawl from the stomach up through the throat into the lungs and airway of the new host, and the cycle restarts. So, what is a pentastomid? When the first specimens were described in the 1700s, they were thought to be actual worms, like flatworms or tapeworms. Later, naturalists noticed the chitinous exoskeletons which molt, and the jointed hooks around the mouth, and began to classify them as some sort of arthropod. By the late 1800s, pentastomids had been classified in all sorts of ways, including as their own phylum entirely, or as some sort of worm-arthropod hybrid. Nobody really knew. The question was finally settled in modern times through genetic analysis. Pentastomids are degenerate cousins of fish lice, a group of crustaceans called the Ichthyostracca. Pentastomids are more than mere curiosities. A dozen species infect humans, mostly seen in the tropics. The most common form of human pentastomiasis is caused by Linguatula serrata. The adult tongueworm normally lives in the nasal passages of dogs and other canines. Sheep, goats, and cattle pick up the eggs while grazing and develop nymphal cysts in their lymph nodes, livers, and lungs. In parts of the Middle East, North Africa, and Central Asia, certain dishes can call for raw or barely cooked liver and lymph nodes from sheep, goats, and camels. When the nymphs in those tissues are eaten by a person, they activate. Within minutes to hours of the meal, the diner develops intense throat irritation, a sensation of crawling at the back of the mouth, painful swallowing, sneezing, coughing, and sometimes bleeding from the nose and mouth. The cause is the live pentastomid attempting to crawl up the esophagus, into the back of the throat, and up into the sinuses. They cannot complete the migration in humans. Most cases resolve as the nymphs eventually die, but the experience can be life-threatening. The other major form of human pentastomiasis is caused by species of the genus Armillifer, which is picked up from contact with snakes. Eggs of Armillifer are shed in snake feces and saliva and contaminate water sources, vegetation, and the snake meat itself. People who handle, butcher, or eat infected snakes can ingest the eggs incidentally. From there, the parasite follows the behavior it would in any intermediate host. The larvae hatch, drill through the gut wall, migrate through the body, and encyst in the liver, lungs, and abdominal lining. In humans, these encysted nymphs of Armillifer usually cause no symptoms. The cysts are walled off by your immune system, calcify, and most people never know they are there. In endemic areas, surveys have shown that 20% of the population may carry these calcified parasites. A heavy infection can compress vital organs or rupture and provoke an inflammatory reaction. Cases have been reported of Armillifer nymphs found in the eyes, spinal cord, heart, and brain. Treatment, when needed, is generally surgical removal. Pentastomids are not only a problem for humans, they are an overlooked source of disease in wild and captive reptiles. They can damage the airways of snakes and crocodiles, sometimes killing the host outright when the parasite load is high enough to obstruct breathing. In zoos and reptile collections, pentastomid infections can spread amongst animals housed together. Conservation programs working with endangered snakes and lizards are routinely screened for these parasites.